And so the theme of my sermon for this morning is, don't be nasty. Okay, don't be nasty. Suzanne and I, we first moved to Ocala, Florida in August of 1993. And on Route 200, there was a Chevron gas station, which was my gas station. It had the least expensive gas in all of Ocala, and it was right on my route to and from work. Well, one day, a new restaurant went in right next to my gas station. It was called the Armpit Palace. It was Indian food. Now, I've never had any experience with Indian food at all. And so me and a couple of my buddies one day, we decided, you know what, we're going to go to the Armpit Palace, and we're going to have some good Indian food. Now, the only thing I knew about Indian food came from the Soup Nazi on Jerry Seinfeld, okay? And I was going to go to the Armpit Palace, and I was going to have some mulligatawny soup, okay? Because that's the only thing I knew about Indian food. And so I showed up, and I'm sitting there, and they bring us bread, and all of a sudden, the smell of curry overwhelmed me. I couldn't take it. I mean, it made me sick to my stomach. I went running out of the Armpit Palace. I ran across the street to Burger King, where I sat and ate lunch by myself until my buddies were done eating, and then they came over and picked me up. So I affectionately call it the Armpit Palace. Okay, so at that point, it was no longer the Armpit Palace, it became the Armpit Palace. And the bad thing was, because of the smell of curry, I could no longer pump gas at my favorite gas station. It ruined everything. Now, I got to be fair. If you were to Yelp the Armpit Palace, they have a 4.5 on Yelp. Okay, so it's got to be good food. It just wasn't for me. So why do I bring up the Armpit Palace? Okay, well, because I'm wondering how in the world did this first century sect of Judaism that we call Christianity, that was based in the armpit of the Roman Empire, I mean, how did it thrive? I mean, how is it that you and I are sitting here in St. Petersburg, Florida, in church, worshiping our risen Lord over 2,000 years later? I mean, how did the Christian church survive? I mean, think about it. This little-known sect in northern Israel, whose leader was rejected and even crucified by his own people. I mean, how did this sect survive and even thrive, especially in an age of violent, organized, state-funded resistance? I mean, another way of saying it is like this. How did the Nazarene sect become embraced by the very empire that sought to extinguish it for over 300 years? You know, if you were to go to Rome and go to the Colosseum, over the emperor's entrance into the Colosseum, there's a cross commemorating the death and resurrection of Jesus. I mean, how is it that Christianity, sandwiched between the temple and the Roman Empire, all of which wanted to wipe it off the face of the earth, I mean, how did it survive? I mean, against all odds, how did it happen? How did Christianity thrive? I mean, especially when you think of Jesus. Okay, he was a day laborer from Nazareth. I mean, now Nazareth was this hole-in-the-wall kind of town. Okay, Nazareth sat on top of a hill inside a bowl. There was nothing strategic about it at all. Okay, I mean, it had 300-400 people at the most. And Nazareth sits on this hill above the Jezreel Valley. That's a picture of the Jezreel Valley. The Jezreel Valley was a major trade route. I mean, there was people always crossing back and forth across the Jezreel Valley. Armies would fight battles there. I mean, this was a very fertile piece of land, strategically important. And yet there's Nazareth, just up the hill, and nobody even knew it was there. I mean, how in the world did this Jesus of Nazareth, whom we all worship, who came out of northern Galilee, out of the small town of Nazareth, ever thrive and survive? Well, I love it because Jesus predicted that it would. It was in Matthew chapter 16. The scripture says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? Now, first of all, that term Son of Man, that's a messianic title. It's a title that Jesus only uses for himself, used some 68 times in the Gospels. Okay, Jesus is talking about himself. He's declaring himself to be the Christ, the Messiah. And he's asking his disciples, I mean, it's a difficult question, right? I mean, he's asking his disciples, what do people say about me? What do people think about me? Who do people say that the Son of Man is? Now, they're in the region of Caesarea Philippi. Let's just go off on a little tangent here. Caesarea Philippi is in northern Israel. It's about 25 miles north of the Sea of Galilee. It would be along the border of modern-day Lebanon and Syria. Okay, and so it sits at the base of Mount Hermon. Now, Mount Hermon is this giant mountain, once again, in northern Israel. When the snows on Mount Hermon melt, they come down and they form the Jordan River. Well, Caesarea was also famous because they had these deep springs. They're the largest springs that also feed into the Jordan River. And the Jordan River is a major source of fresh water for Israel and Syria and Lebanon and all of the nations over there. Okay, it goes all the way from northern Israel all the way south to the Dead Sea. So there's this giant spring that is gushing out from a cave. All right, and because of that, the region of Caesarea was extremely fertile. And because there was this water that was coming from below the ground, it became ripe for pagan worship. So Jesus and his disciples, they're in Caesarea Philippi, in this area where pagan temples and pagan worship is taking place all over. Here in Caesarea Philippi, the major god was Pan. Okay, Pan, you've seen pictures of him. He's half goat and half man. Okay, he was the god of the pastures, the god of farming, but he was also the god of the underworld. Okay, it's where we get our common word panic from. Because there was so much that was unknown, there was so much that was scary. It was the underworld. And so Jesus says to his disciples, "Who do people say I am?" The disciples replied, "Some say John the Baptist, and others say Elijah, and still Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. But what about you?" Jesus asked. "Who do you say that I am?" Oh, and then good old foot in the mouth Peter, he finally got one right. He said, "Jesus, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah." I mean, I bet Peter and the other disciples say, "Jesus, we don't fully understand it. We can't get our arms around it. But Jesus, we know that you're the Christ. We know that you're the promised one." Jesus goes on to say, "For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock, on this proclamation, Peter, that you just made, on this truth that you just stated, that I am the Christ, the Son of the living God, Peter, upon this statement, I will, not maybe, not could be, not possibly, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it."